which, by the way, like, I'm saying these things, and I've thought these things in the past, and they scare the ever-living shit out of me.
A two-dimensional creature trying to jump up to 3 dimensions and then say that it's 2 dimensions. Like, it's not.
Well, yeah. So, wow, I love and hate that. That hurts my brain. All right, awesome. So, yeah, thanks everybody for checking this out. My name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I am with a internet acquaintance, Miss SATYAVATARA. We wanted to talk about basically spirituality and spirituality specifically within the context of what looks like World War III. So, kind of crazy times to be alive and crazy times to be a person and a human. And that's kind of what we wanted to get into. So, could you introduce yourself to everybody at home?
All right. This is SATYAVATARA. The nickname can be Satya, and actually am leader of a religion called Satyavatism and founder that has been propagating through the world for about 10 years now. And it is an evolution of all other religions, and also encompasses the religions, all world religions and multi-faiths. And it is, well, that it can explain the religion depending on how this proceeds, the conversation that this proceeds. But it basically is an evolution of religion. I wanted to expand at this point, now that it's been 10 years, expand the scope of the reach. And this also is an activist for several different causes, one of which would be world peace, obviously. And because of what is occurring, this was going to originally speak on a particular topic, and then decided, because of the urgency of the situation that is occurring now in the world, that there is no better time to speak than now. So we can proceed with, again, this basically speaks about any topic in the world, basically, and urgent matters, just wide-ranging.
Yeah, so I have some questions immediately off the bat. So it's interesting that you kind of brought some of those things up. I have a friend named Layman. He introduced me to a concept called perennialism, which is the belief that, like, what is true about religion, like all religion is basically us trying to scrape at the transcendental, scrape at the nature of God and existence and mortality and spirituality. And what is true about a religion that survives the test of time and basically propagates into the future against, like, scrutiny and criticism and all that kind of stuff. As it moves along, whatever remains true will be true, and then as a result, you can kind of have this kind of deistic perspective where religious moral order can kind of, like, evolve over time. So how would you view? And then I guess my question is, are you the founder of this religion, and then how do you view that worldview in connection with your own?
Yes, that the religions that say were founded at certain times in the apparent history should be relevant today, and if not, then they become archaic, and they basically become non-existent anymore. So the major religions have would stand the test of time, obviously, apparently, because they've, in a sense, their practices have continued to evolve. The practices of and the reinterpretation of scriptures and etc. So, and basically all of the major world religions converge in the truth. On the highest level, it may be more of a case of, instead of the actual practices of, say, the rituals, or going to mass, or going to church, or going to masjid or temple, etc. That there's the truth that actually converges in the various religions, is on the higher level in terms of actual gnosis. So many practice, but then they don't go beyond into the more mystical aspects, which ultimately it has to do with the self-realization, and actually experiencing truth directly. And that is the big gap, the big difference between the performative religion, where it's a stage, in other words, where you enter the ritual of religion. And then it can be extended in certain cases to how everyone's supposed to behave, and then practice the religion in the world. But ultimately, there has to be a step beyond that, even where it becomes direct gnosis, direct experience. And there are very few in the world that actually experience that. There are hints of it, and there are ways to transcend, sometimes more temporally, with psychedelics, with psychoactive substances and all, and that, but then usually that come down from that sort of direct experience, and then back to the mundane reality. And there's this large gap that takes place, where it's not the direct experience does not become a constant, where self-realization happens, and then there's no turning back from that, and there's the ability. It basically becomes the difference between performative and enlightenment, and there is the middle range, which is how to behave in the world,
If you see me jumping off mute, it's because I'm like, oh, I want to ask that question. I want to ask this question. I want to ask this question.
yeah.
And so for instance, gnosis. If I'm understanding it, because this is not something that I've studied sufficiently, but gnosis, based off of what you're saying, is kind of like knowledge or experience of the truth, or knowledge or experience of God. Am I defining that correctly, or am I off?
Yes, direct experience, but and then not intermittent experience, but I mean the goal is to have direct experience and have it be constant in the world, and that is basically true enlightenment. And in the various religions, there are quote narratives and stories about that, and that can be a goal. So, for instance, the uh, uh, Buddha consciousness, cosmic consciousness. In Christianity, it's Gnosticism. In Islam, maybe it's Sufism, or etc. And so, but primarily, what happens in the world is that it is stop at a certain phase, and maybe not even realize that this is a capability, and it's the fulfillment of so many scriptures. Meaning, maybe, for instance, say with Jesus, instead of worshiping Jesus, etc., to be able to attain to Jesus consciousness, or Buddha consciousness, etc. So
Well, so how do you contend? Because this is I would say I've had spiritual experiences that I would say would be akin to, gnosis, or truth, or revelation, or seeing the path, or something like that. But there's a part of mundane reality where you want to be skeptical of your own experience. You want to disconnect from it, or disassociate, or be critical of it, because it can be, number one, it can be so overwhelming that it's tough, because it basically demands of you change in how you behave and what
exactly.
you do and all that kind of stuff. But then also, some of those changes can be seen as extreme, by other
Mm-hmm.
people. So, for instance, like I'm sure that pacifism or the desire to end war and all that kind of stuff, and to end struggle, and to kind of find a harmonious balance between like life and other creatures and humanity and all that kind of stuff. That can feel like a higher order calling from like the truth or the not Gnostic experience. But then you come back into reality and you're like, well, shit, I have to work a job and I have to pay bills and I have to deal with my family and there's war and I have to deal with the institutions of existence that are in front of me. And I can't just walk into the world barefooted and say, hey, I've achieved divine enlightenment. I actually know
Right.
what God wants, and I'm just gonna tell you like it is, and then everybody, snap is gonna be like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna listen to this person now. It doesn't seem like that happens. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you view those challenges between kind of like the transcendental spiritual revelatory experiences versus the challenges of the real world that we all find ourselves in?
Right. Well, everyone is capable of attaining this consciousness. So ultimately, this is about the evolution of humans. And if we're going to concentrate on a particular species, now maybe can provide context. And know that I'm going to speak of basically some ideas that probably are have not been spoken of before. So the different multi-species have their own groups basically. So it's a form of tribalism in the different groups. The bears and the elephants and all, and then there are humans. But humans have basically taken over the planet, and so in a sense, these tribes can be likened to cults. And I'm not using the word cult in a derogatory manner, just saying that ultimately it is like that. So and also there's the word culture. So basically it is that. So this speaks of the cult of humanity. And so what the basically the humans have taken over the planet, and they're in a sense they're guardians of the planet. They should be guardians of the planet, and they should be able to take into consideration all of the other species of the planets and their benefit to be a benefit to those as well. Now I know that nature is inherently violent, but humans have agreed to a certain extent to try to reduce violence because they have gotten to a point where they can rationally decide, theoretically, in this case, can rationally decide not to be involved in gratuitous violence or barbarism and all. But there's a point where humans have not evolved yet, and this is key here, have not evolved yet to the point where violence is no longer necessary for conflict and war.
Oh,
So,
I have
mhm,
I have so many questions. So, one, I just want to agree with you that particularly in the biblical scriptural sense, you said guardian. It actually. So one of the
right.
words that I heard growing up was steward.
Correct.
We are a
Hmm.
steward. We are supposed to be somebody who's taking care of the kingdom. And one of the things that's really frustrating for me is if you look at, you were talking about like performative ritual
Hmm.
versus actual gnosis, and performative ritual versus connection to the world around you. The performative ritual is, oh, I'm a good Christian because I go to church on Sundays. Whereas the actual connection to the text would be, I'm called to be a steward of the planet and a steward of my family, which means that I take care of my family, I take care of my planet, I care about the way things work, and I try to live this value set as best as possible.
Right.
The um, one of the things that you said that I think is really interesting, and I actually wanted to ask you about this. A lot of people, when they have a transcendental spiritual experience, they are repulsed by violence. They it's
Yes.
almost counterintuitive for them to engage in violence. But one of the things that you said that I thought was really insightful was necessary, because it does
Mm,
seem like there's a delineation where we want to separate ourselves from the material world to the point that like violence is no longer necessary, or we want to think ourselves past violence. We want to achieve a world that is in harmony. But then it seems like through war or law enforcement or like cultural, the cult of humanity, like cultural requirements necessitate some level of authority and enforcement. So how do you square the spiritual experience of trying to get everything into harmony versus like the demands of the material world?
right. Well, it is it's a process, and again, say that it's an evolution because in a sense, you cannot get the world all on the same page, quote unquote, because
Well,
everyone
we can start
evolved.
putting psychedelics into their water, right? We can start there.
Right. Because if basically everyone became enlightened all at once, then the world would be an entirely different place. So, and this is not the ability to do so takes process, and it also it will well there are. I'm going to mention a few more basically ideas here, concepts. There seems to be this likens it to, again, is speaking about the label that it is basically come to in being able to deliver some of these ideas. So basically, you have the cult of humanity, and most are basically they're hypnotized by all the information that has come before. So there's human, it basically, instead of white supremacy, let's go beyond that and go meta. It's a human supremacy, but here's the key: human identity disorder. So we put all of those three aspects together, and then we try to explain this. Most are have identification with the body. So we're speaking of spirituality here. Spirituality is transcendent to the body. It includes all that is manifest in the world, all of the forms, including the body itself. This refers to it as a apparent primary body, meaning the one that you are most used to and is around all the time, apparently, when viewing the world. The apparent primary body is part of the world. It is not separate from the world. It's not that you are in the world and then there's a world. It's that it's all one. So the misidentification is that most think that they're the body, and they also think that they're the story the linear narrative, the history of a particular body that happens to be yours. And so they're basically walking around in a consensus dream of the world, because the absolute reality is not the overlay and superimposition of all the narratives and stories that one tells oneself, and one thinks about someone else, and or thinks about a particular group, or thinks about a particular country, or the history, though, it's not about the narrative, and all of the hypnotism that has been passed down generation to just endlessly. When one comes into the world, it's basically human indoctrination in how to work within the world from when it first appears, so that it doesn't know anything else but what it's been indoctrinated to know. And but the misidentification is that there is a witness that is a witness to all of this. There's a witness to the body. There's a witness to the world. And the misidentification is that everyone thinks they're the body and that they're in the world, instead of being the witness consciousness, the consciousness that is perceiving the world, that is perceiving the body, and that
Do you?
everything is in
Mhm.
the cosmic,
So,
universal consciousness. Mhm.
well, in so that that appeals to a lot of people for a variety of reasons, including myself, because I think that mortality can be terrifying. The fact that you're in a body, you're a part of the world. There's so many bad things that can happen to you, and bad things that can happen to other people. That this can all be alarming and terrifying. And it seems like we have biological and mundane mechanisms to help us cope. The entire time, I deal with internet languages and internet subcultures all the time. Whenever people are talking about ideas that are scary and they want to dismiss them, they say, "Oh, that's cope, right? That's just
Mhm.
you coping with the mechanisms of the world." But I see the stories and the narratives that you were highlighting, to paraphrase you for internet language, you're like, that's cope. We're using these narratives to help us live in the world, and
Right.
we're passing on these traditions in order to help us live. But there's an underlying truth that is separate from the narrative. The narrative is just this human fabrication that we've
Right.
made in order to understand the world. But the underlying truth is the witness, the universal consciousness. I think the reason why this appeals to a lot of people who are seeking spirituality is because if they could be a part of the witness, or if they're already part of the witness, or if the universal consciousness is fundamental to existence, this already lines up with a lot of people's perceptions of God and eternity, maybe even afterlife, and also like the unity of being. If you were looking at like the Taoist conception of like the unity of being, so that's where your articulation. I love it, but at the same time, I'm always scared of that concept because, for instance, like I'm in the biological body, I'm in the human body, and it seems like when this body disappears, a lot of the manifestations, a lot of the things that I'm familiar with and that I love, are specific to this human experience. My relationships, my material goods, my family, all that kind of stuff. It's very specific. So I'm worried that when you lose the individual component, you lose that part of yourself. And there's a possibility that when this human body ends, all that will be available to me is oblivion and the dark, subconscious oblivion. And I think that's where a lot of people, they just kind of accept that either they will go to the universal conscious or they will go to oblivion, and that's kind of what we've all been dealing with as mortal creatures. So do
Mhm.
you, yeah, how do you feel about that?
Well, the consciousness that is apparently within the body is also within everything. So it's within, and it's the same consciousness. So, for instance, when the thought, when there are no thoughts, and I know a lot of humans have trouble with that. They're always, their thoughts are racing, or because the nervous systems have been overloaded with information, basically, and they've gotten to the point where they can't just basically say the body walk around or sit or whatever without constant thinking. Yeah, thinking is a blessing and a curse in a sense. Thinking can be used for the highest purposes, and basically for and for for manifesting the apparent future, but it also can lead to mental illness, and on the other side of the spectrum, mental illness and anguish and all sorts of mental disorders. So the goal would be to be able to use thinking in ways where the consciousness is in control of the thinking, rather than, because there's a phenomenon where you could say, where some say that they think and they can't stop thinking. So the thinking, in a sense, takes control of the body, and the body suffers from it, and because the thoughts are believed. So as long as the thoughts are believed, then there's that can lead to all sorts of, again, all sorts of problems. But the goal is to use thinking in a directed, manifesting way, meaning proactively, and then to use it for the highest purposes, for all sorts of purposes, basically, but also for the highest purposes and toward evolution. So, also the goal is to be able to can turn thought on and off. So when basically when the mind is used, and then be in full control of it. In other words, that is possible, and so it's very it can once that is basically attained, then it's perfectly possible to not have any thought at all, and still to function perfectly and spontaneously, and immediately to any stimuli that happens around the apparent body. In other words, the thought language is basically the primary hypnotism of humans. All other species may or may not have language to a certain extent, but humans have evolved language to a point where they're actually hypnotizing themselves into all sorts of situations, which may or may not, in certain cases, be very detrimental. Like, for instance, what is going on right now,
Yeah.
the third
So
world war.
yeah, I actually I want to ask this question before I lose it again because I had it like 10 minutes ago. Do you think, because I've actually wondered this myself, um, do you think that animals have some level of like fundamental natural gnosis where they are acting impulsively, acting based off of instinct, acting based off of, the material world with which they're surrounded on, on the impulses that they need to, but also there might be like a fundamental understanding of like, hey, I'm this, temporary creature of the world and I am a part of a bigger chain. And so the anxiety that humans feel is because we have these narratives, we have these constructs. And one of the constructs that we've created is that we're separate from the chain of being. We're above
Yes,
the chain of being. We're not a part of it. We are somehow higher evolved than the chain of being. Whereas with animals, they don't seem to experience that anxiety at all. It's like
right,
they know instinctively that they're a part of the chain of being. So on one hand, we associate that with our superiority because we think ourselves somehow having thought past mortality and spirituality and transcendental states and this, that, the other. We're so evolved, we're so strong, we're so much better than our impulses. And yet it seems like the people who think that way experience an existential and spiritual crisis that they don't want to acknowledge because they don't want to acknowledge that spirituality is a thing. Whereas if you look at a simple creature, I literally have a dog sitting, on the bed like 3 feet away from me. I don't see any angst or anxiety. They just seem to be like, hey,
right.
I'm here. I'm down for the adventure. I'm going to act based off of impulse. And on top of that, I know I'm a part of a bigger thing, so I'm just going to kind of chill. There doesn't seem to be that underlying existential anxiety.
Right. Yes. Most likely, unless certain animals have been traumatized, basically by actual experiences and not language. That that they're already, in a sense, they're experiencing the now, the eternal, because this is eternity. When this speaks of now, it's basically saying
I want
eternity.
to I want to
So,
ask that
mhm.
why would trauma be a trigger to disconnect them from the now, or you know, because I think you said yes, but then you said that like trauma can interrupt that process. So could you explain that?
Because yes, because there are certain animals that actually, like say, elephants, say, mourn the loss of a parent elephant, and then go into mourning, and that is, in a sense, becomes a disconnect. It's connecting to what actually is occurring, basically the phenomenon of uh, of the apparent death of a body, and then being connected to that now, but then it also ends up disconnecting in some way from the surrounding environment while it's experiencing that mourning. So in that case, then it would be somewhat of an enlargement of a certain phenomenon in the nearby that then would that keep it from be having an expansive consciousness of all that is around it. So,
So
mhm.
why do you think that we seem to be programmed that way? And so obviously there's simpler creatures and more complex creatures and all that kind of thing. But if we think that consciousness is parallel, and that some creatures seem to have evolved the capacity to mourn, and that they can connect and disconnect to experience the same way that we can. What do you think is the existential purpose of that? Because basically, what I would say is, it seems like connecting to the universal consciousness, that gnosis that you were saying. Some people view that as like the ultimate pursuit is to be connected and to let that guide your life, to drive your life, because you're kind of experiencing that higher level of being, and it's calling you to do certain things within the world. But then it seems that it like human beings, like you said, we have these narratives, these constructs that we've been able to build to kind of disconnect us from that story, or from that existence. Excuse me, story is the wrong word. But then an animal, as far as we know, we don't think that they have those levels of social constructs. So what would be the purpose, basically?
Well, to agree with what you were saying before about most species, that basically they're not encumbered by language. So for the most part, they're basically in touch with their environment, and it's not um, and do not really exhibit body consciousness in meaning the sense of the body kind of falls away, and they're in basically in the now. So for instance, there is no actual past and there is not any future. The past is memory, basically, of that is stored in the mind, and the future is projected, and also of images and ideas and intents and fantasies, etc. That is projected into the future. As far as the future, though, is that that can be used to manifest uh, phenomenon in the world. But the past, it's not that the events did not happen. It's that it's that the constant remembering of events as if there is an actual concrete past is that's the how the mechanics of the mind actually works, but that's not how reality works. So there were animals are more in touch with actually what is occurring now, and they're more spontaneous because of that. Um,
Can
so
I
the
can
goal.
I
Mhm.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of ask about your perception of that, because one of the things, I experienced loss, of, you know, something that I cared about. It was a pet, but I'd known her for a really long time, decades really. And in the passage of time, one of the painful parts of the mourning process was thinking to myself, like, well, her life was inconsequential. She only impacted me. She didn't impact anybody else. And it feels like a shame, considering the amount of pain that I'm in, that this will not be remembered by the world, basically. And
Right.
so, what happened though was, while she was actually passing, I walked her through that experience, and I was there till the end, and I felt honored to have done that. But basically, what happened was there was a solidity, to, at least for me, anyways, of our past together, where I thought, well, her impact on the world, is infinitesimally small. She's one creature on one planet with one, caretaker, and but her impact on the chain of being and the chain of impact continues, where the kindness and the affection and the love that she showed me gave me strength
Right.
and allowed me to in turn give kindness and affection to other people. And so through that, what feels like a solidity of that experience, her life and death did matter, because there was a kind of like a fact of the matter of her existence at a certain time in a certain space. So how do you incorporate that into your view, I guess?
Right. Yes, everything affects everything else, even the smallest, tiniest, seeming inconsequential, even just on, again, full spectrum, consequential act or apparent object or being apparently, every all affects all, because all is connected. So because it when it comes down to it, what is manifest is all one. It's all one. And so most humans are disconnected from that reality, and they concentrate on the human reality instead. And many fail to see how everything is connected. So, and nothing is lost. Nothing's ever lost. So, case in point, then, the way in which the apparent pet companion has affected, and then that reverberates through in different acts, or not only an apparent memory, but the memory activates in consciousness, and then action takes place because of it. So that is another way in which that apparent form, that consciousness within that apparent form continues on. There are so many ways in which it all apparently continues on. So, meaning the past, present, and future are all happening at once, because in quote unquote, because everything that has ever occurred and everything that is occurring right now is reverberating through the multiverse, basically. So
How,
nothing's ever lost.
yeah, how do you view temporal space? So for instance, like, this is my understanding of it, and I know I have a flawed understanding of it, but it seems like we exist within a binary universe, and what I mean by that, it could be an illusion. I have no idea. But when we look at, from a scientific perspective, you look at reality, it seems like our creation, whether you're talking about like atoms, molecules, complex structures, all of these things are made up of two things, which is something and nothing. And
Right.
you need the nothing in order to create the something, for that something to have form. And it's actually amazing that out of a binary construct of something and nothing, you're creating everything that we see. Like it's beautiful and amazing and complex,
Mhm.
but also terrifying. And so, basically, when you're talking about like temporal space, what's crazy is when you talk to a physicist and they're like, oh, well, if you boil down all physical matter into a singularity, time ceases to exist. And
There is no time.
excuse
Time
my
doesn't exist. Right.
right, yeah. So that sends my mind reeling because I'm like, what? Like, no, I experience every moment of my life
Right.
as a temporal experience. I'm a mortal creature. I only have certain, like, so much time in this existence. This is, frustrating and terrifying. So when somebody tells me, when a physicist, right, it's supposed to be somebody who's,
Right.
they're supposed to be skeptical about the spiritual realm. They're supposed to say this is all woo and voodoo baloney. But if a singularity exists, time itself does not exist as a matter of material function. That sends me into a freak out because basically, I was raised with a biblical conception of God, which is the Alpha and the Omega. It's the beginning and the end. It's timelessness. It's eternal. It's the fundamental force of the universe. And so when I have a modern physicist who's probably an atheist describing a singularity without time, and then I
Mm-hmm.
look at biblical description of the unity of God, I'm like, even if you guys feel like you're talking about something completely different, the parallels are so obvious that it's painful.
Right.
So yeah, so I feel
Right.
like we probably just agreed, but you're saying that as a function of the unity, time seems to be baloney.
Right. Time is a human construct, basically, and it's used for it's used for practical purposes, but it's conflated with actually with misunderstanding phenomenal reoccurrences and phenomenal activity, and conflating that with the construct, and also with the apparatus, like for instance a clock, a digital clock, etc. And that's where the programming comes in, having been programmed from the get-go to think that time exists. And so yes, when science starts to corroborate the fact that it does not, then that's science catching up with gnosis. In the religion that this created, science and language and mathematics are of primary importance, and so they're encompassed within the religion as an evolution, which is something that has not apparently occurred in the world before. So this is very is very knowledgeable about the science, and how spirituality and science can converge. And yes, there are some that basically shout woo and all that, and this is acutely aware of that, and make sure that that is not something that's within the way this describes from direct experience the world and the teachings that are revealed.
Some,
So
so,
but there
sometimes
is. Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
But in fact, yes, time. In other words, this is eternity right now. The universe has been going on for eternity, even though the beginning of it has been. There's a big beginning point, according to science, of the quote Big Bang and all that, but it's well beyond that even, and science. This would this would term science and mathematics, etc., to be the non-fictional aspect of human species information. So from the enlightened perspective, and I know this is going to sound rather odd, but from the enlightened perspective of most human information becomes fiction, And but science and mathematics and quantifiable empirical information about phenomenon and being able to describe the world in say scientific ways, that's very important. And but even that has to evolve because there are biases and information that eventually even scientific theories get discarded, and then new ones are created. Paradigm shifts in science occur, and that is how science is evolves as well.
Yeah.
Mathematics has more of a tendency to just in certain ways it's divined, and it is and it, more or less the absolute truths remain constant in mathematics, but mathematics also has to be evolved as well.
So, so how do you feel about like the cosmological phenomena? So for instance, like we look at the universe and it's constantly expanding, and allegedly it's expanding so quickly that gravity will no longer be a thing and materials will fall apart and this, that, the other. But at the same time, they also just use dark matter
Mm,
as a catch-all variable
right.
where they're like, oh, gravitationally, this thing should have shot off into space by now. There must be dark matter. And then, on top of that, as if that wasn't freaky enough, at the center of every galaxy, there's a supermassive black hole,
Yes.
which has a gravity well
Right.
that seems to hold everything in place, and it also seems like everything is going back into it. So for me, because you seem confidently in tune with these ideas, but whenever I talk about these ideas, I freak myself out. It seems like that the universe, like you said, could be eternal.
It is.
That from a temporal standpoint, like a human narrativized standpoint, it could be cyclical, in that the cycle of the division of the unity of consciousness and then the reassumption of the unity of consciousness comes from like the physical division that temporarily creates time and narrative and stories and different creatures and nature as we know it. But then these things all come back together at the quote unquote end of the universe in order to start the universe again. So do you think that my summary, which by the way, like I'm saying these things and I've thought these things in the past and they scare the ever living shit out of me. But is that a similar perception to what you have as far as the way the universe functions?
Yeah, yes, in a sense, it's and it would go beyond that even to say that that when that what's considered the universe. First of all, it's the universe that is the visible aspect of the universe. So the dark matter maybe is what has not been detected yet by science, and then at some point they'll be able to probe that and find to be able to see some of what is not perceptible. So the theoretical information is that that 95% of the universe is not perceivable. So that leaves 5% that is, and again, this is going to evolve. So now, also add to that what is apparently the from a perspective of what turns into what is it, a globe, sort of like all around from a 360 up and down and around and all that, since the universe is sort of
It might
flying
be
away, it's flying away.
a
Mhm.
rhomboid or something like that. I forget the shape, but I'm gonna look it up real quick.
In a
But
sense,
but
a
but there's one.
ball.
It's
uh,
almost like a donut almost,
um
but it's like cinched in the middle.
Oh, we're speaking about the actual what the shape would be, but from the
Hmm.
perspective of being able to visibly the visible universe, and not speaking of the dark matter, but the visible universe all around, from all perspectives. It's kind of like if you were in a forest and you're carrying a lantern, and you're holding a lantern in front and walking. So it's going to be the same viewing all the way around the body, basically, where the light is this finite distance, and that you can only see within the light, within the orb of the light, the only the surroundings, and then past that, everything is, say, pitch black. So the universe is the visible universe is like that. There's the universe that is not visible, that like maybe stars that are no longer within the range of view, and there's only the light that's coming. And then past that, there's a barrier in a sense where the light cannot be seen anymore because it's flying away from in all directions. So
Yeah,
so that's where
I
science can hits a wall in a sense, because it cannot see beyond that. And then
yeah. So
mhm,
I looked it up. It's called a torus, a torus, and I am talking about like a geometric shape for the people at home, because this is something that's like
right, yeah,
cosmologically significant.
hmm
Is that we can only see so far in the universe before we can't even perceive things anymore.
hmm
And then, unfortunately, there was like an astrophysicist. I swear to God, I wanted to slap him in the face. I was literally like watching like different like cosmological studies or whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, the universe is a flat sheet of paper,"
oh,
and I'm
right,
like,
right,
"What?" I'm like,
right,
"What?" And then he's like, "Yeah, the universe is a flat sheet of paper," and I'm like, no, you perceive the universe to be a flat sheet of paper. There's no way that you could absolutely know with 100% certainty that what you can visibly see is all there is. And he's like, no, it's flat. And then I'm like, I wanted to choke him, because like the hubris of assuming that you can know that which is not perceivable. I get that it's scary for humans, and it's scary for creatures to not know things. Mystery is uncomfortable. Not knowing things is uncomfortable. But the fact that this guy was so confidently asserting something that I guarantee you will be disproven in 500 years, like it borderline made me angry considering human history.
right. Because there are so many dimensions, and I mean, at least with the string theory, it's posited that there were 11 dimensions. Obviously, there are going to be many, many more than that. It's about discovering them, and so it's a posit that it's flat or whatever. That means that within that, you wouldn't be able to get off the flat point in order to be able to see above it. So it makes it so that you would not know it wouldn't know that it could not know that. It's like
Well, but
a two-dimensional
do you,
creature trying to jump up to three dimensions when and then say that it's two dimensions. Like it's not.
well, yeah. So wow, I love and hate that. That hurts my brain. So how do you? Because I've heard the 11 dimensions before.
Yeah, it's beyond that.
Um,
Yeah.
and and I am frustrated that I am a 3.5 dimensional creature who's gifted with like intelligence and the potential to understand a decent chunk of things, because I feel at home. I feel at home here. I like the human narrative. I like the species. I like the planet. I like all of these things. I'm familiar with it. I love it. And there's certain slices of this experience that if I could perpetuate for eternity, I would. I would literally slice them out as moments and keep them forever. And I know that you're saying, with a relative degree of personal Gnostic certainty, that there is this eternal universal consciousness that we're all a part of, that we emanate from, and that we will return to. And I appreciate that. And I hope you're right. I hope to God you're right, because I think that's what we're talking about. But I'm still scared. I'm still
So,
scared of the cycle and change and death and
right.
mortality. I'm scared of all
So
these things.
there is a way to go beyond this right now. But it take so, and this is apropos of what is going on in the world, and so this information that has been propagated is to try to get this information out there, so that there can be change like that. And but this is where say the information that you have been providing in the fundamentals series about starting with oneself and working with oneself first, and being able to help others, but before helping others, in a sense, having the ability to help oneself first and then help others. So, correct, that is
Yeah,
one of
you
the
you
features of
gotta
that series, correct? Hmm.
yeah, kind of have to hit like actually if I could share like a little metaphorical thing, it's like you're drowning and then you hit the ocean floor and then you have to kick back up in order to reach the surface again. So in some sense you have to come to some level of peace with the fact that you're drowning, and do an inventory of what's possible, and then start pushing with what's possible. But
Hmm.
yes, absolutely. Start with yourself, and then move incrementally out through building of understanding of yourself and understanding of the world around you, and understanding of what brings you value and purpose.
Right. So there are a number of many just innumerable ways that one can wake up from the hypnosis. Some of the ways are that trauma is either persistent trauma, like chronic trauma, or traumas that occur due to circumstances that interrupt the regular scheduled programming of life, and then a crisis occurs. There are other ways to do that where there's no crisis whatsoever, and you simply go into it, and then work on that evolution out into. In other words, it can happen on many different levels, in many different ways. But it seems the most likely that a crisis has to occur in order to wake up out of this, and then either it creates a rip in reality, a breakthrough, and out into the open of all of experience, or it's just a temporary sort of view, and then you go back into the hypnotism again. So what's um, the working upon oneself, it's similar to that, but it's about the not understanding what the true self is. So functionally in the world, that can help to develop oneself and to get out, to come, say, out of crisis, and to transform one's life, and then work toward healing oneself, and then reestablishing establishing a different way of living, and then having basically, in a sense, recovered, then to extend that to others, and to extend that to the world. But there's another way
Right.
that is more direct, and that
Sure.
is to realize the reality of oneself as the divinity that is within the body, and basically all around. So I want to introduce the idea of non-dualism. So there are different religions, and are dealing with what is considered divinity, meaning spirit, and then some are more or less um, um, hospitable to including the body as maybe divine or not, or some are sort of in the past, maybe. want to ignore the body or treat the body badly in certain cases. But the goal would be to realize the true self, and also to realize that the manifestation is also divine as well. So in non-duality, or say Eastern religion, say Hinduism and Buddhism, although Buddhism does, in a sense, doesn't believe in a self, and does not address cosmetological and basically what the world is. It does not go beyond to address that, but in any case, non-duality would be that this is all seamless, one reality, and that the consciousness basically is the self, and but then some take that too far and just identify with consciousness and not, and say I'm not the body and all of that, but or use a realization of spirit or consciousness in order to want to get out uh, of the world, or escape from the world. And what should be the case
That's what
is there
that's
should
what a
be,
lot of people
right,
criticize spiritual folks for
because it's
is
anti-life in a
they
sense. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead. It's
Oh,
in a
so
sense it's against life, or it's a negation of the manifestation. So to use the word God for a moment, it's like as if you're acknowledging God, but you're ignoring what God has created, that is a manifestation of
and
itself.
rejecting your gift, in rejecting the gift of experience. I think that's where a lot of people won't acknowledge, and this is part of the frustration with some of the religious traditions of the past, right? So like you mentioned, Buddhism would acknowledge change as like the fundamental variable of the universe and deny the self, and that there's a lot of it would introduce like mindfulness or mindlessness, sometimes depending on the definition, which can be a powerful like meditative tool, but then it also feels like under the fundamentals, it's almost asking you to ignore life. And then, like you said, with Christianity, can you hear me okay?
It seems to be cutting out a little bit, but I'm able to hear. Yeah, but it is, there is some cutting out
What
on the end.
what about
Hmm.
what about now? What
That's
about
fine.
now?
That's fine.
Or is it worse?
Right.
Okay.
Like for
I
instance,
have to
with
jump
Buddhism, the
between
suffering.
internet.
Hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Buddhism almost calls you to ignore your life, and then same thing
Hmm.
with Christianity, where it's like, he is, you are of God and not of the world, and if you're of the world, then you're against God, and all that kind of stuff. There can be
In the
like
world,
a
but not
separate.
of it. Right. Hmm. Hmm.
Right. Yeah, and so there can be a lot of negativity associated with that stuff, and then also, it feels like when it comes to being Gnostic or spiritual, what a lot, like even me, my temptation in this conversation is, fuck my job. Like I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I don't want to participate in this, narrative illusion of man that seeds power to corrupt people to make money for bullshit. Like fuck all these people. Like there's so much better shit to be doing with my life. But at the same time, I'm subject to these powers and these institutions and these narratives because I'm reliant on them for survival. So I think people avoid gnosis or spiritualism or spirituality because they basically know that, or they're worried that if they connect with it at all, they're basically, like you said, they're going to float away. They're not
Right.
even going to be able to be connected to the world anymore because of the higher order connection. And also, people in this realm, no offense to you, they tend to be. I've tracked everything you've said, and I've had similar ideas in the past. but it does seem like some people do get lost in the clouds and they can't keep it as an articulable vision. And so it comes out as an incoherent, kind of jumble of concepts rather than a coherent concept. And I'm
Mhm.
actually really thankful for the coherency.
Mhm.
One of the things that I wanted to ask, though, because this kind of is a tangent that I've had in the back of my head, what do you do with what I would say not as false gnosis, because like they did experience the transcendental or the spiritual or the revelatory or whatever, but then people using that spiritual experience in order to claim an authority and then to implement what we would view as evil things. So, for instance, not trying to get heretic right here, but Islam in particular, I think Muhammad had a profound religious experience where he saw things that were wrong with his society and he set out on a crusade to make those things right. But then, once he gained power and influence through his revelations, he basically became an imperial warlord. So, what do you do where spiritualism, spirituality, or connection to God can be used as an authority to justify horrific things? What do
Right.
you do personally with that?
Um, well, that's where the realization, in a sense, has to be tested, and so it shows by the fruits that it bears. So, in that way, so meaning for instance, there are gurus that are apparently that are known in the world and that as enlightened and all, but then end up the circumstances around them end up where it turns into scandal and all. So so you can tell fairly easily when situations like that occur that there's that it hasn't been say the highest enlightenment, or maybe it's intermittent, or so it becomes really obvious what true enlightenment, apparently what true enlightenment it is, and that what say uh, what's claimed to be enlightenment is or isn't. So um, it's see everyone has this possibility, because what they're innately meaning that if it is real enlightenment, it's by nature that will not occur. If the abuse of power because of while claiming enlightenment, it's it's a contradiction. It means that there's pollution in the way that, and it's
I
basically not obscuring the enlightenment that's claimed. So
can I
it
yeah, can I share because the filter, so for instance, like I think um I appreciate everything that you said, and it's actually kind of made coherent a lot of disparate ideas that I had separately on my own, and actually kind of made them into a more coherent vision of like existence. And again, I don't know what happens after people die, but I'm hoping that the gnosis or the revelations that I've had in the past kind of allow me to continue down this path, basically. But what I would cite to you as my understanding is that like pure gnosis or knowledge or enlightenment is difficult, borderline impossible, and we're all always translating the spiritual through the filter of the human experience. And we have mundane needs like sexual needs and calorie needs and social needs and all that kind of stuff. So it's the filter of humanity that ends up corrupting the spiritual, and it's not something to be like, oh well, that means that human beings are evil and we should like discount our bodies or discount our experience. It's more like I have to check the mundane animalistic impulses that are a part of my body that might lead me to use spiritual enlightenment for my own ends, and that's what I would submit.
Mhm. It's hmm, again, it would be identification with there's say um, the consciousness, say universal consciousness. This is God consciousness, and then there's body consciousness. So when there's identification with the body as being you, see, it could go into, there's so much information that could be provided here so that you get a clearer understanding of the difference between identifying with the body, basically, or identifying with being human, and then identifying with the consciousness. So so when they speak about God, basically in non-duality, there's, or in Veda Vedanta, and then again in this religion that has been founded, there's a way to realize oneself so that it is the manifestation, including the body, coexists with and is within the identity changes. The identity then becomes the universal self. So so then say in Hinduism, they could say, I am God. So that sounds basically like the small body is saying I'm God, but that's not what's being said. What's being said is that the true I, the true identity, the real I, is the consciousness and not the body. And so, and then if you want to liken that to other religions, that it's not just that there's a spirit or a consciousness trapped within the body or whatever, but that it's everywhere. So even animating atoms or subatomic particles. So there, in other words, there's no separation in non-duality. There's no separation between the consciousness that appears to be in one particular body and in another body and in another body. It's all the same consciousness, and there's no separation of so the attributes of what is God, which is omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience. If you go in, apparently, if you go in, and this is where I like to speak about how to do this, or the beginnings of how to do this, then it becomes apparent that those attributes are attributes that are direct experience. They're the essence of oneself. They're not the projection of say God, and I'm not using the word God in the sense of the Abrahamic God. I'm speaking of using the word God in a larger, more encompassing way. That, like for instance, when Einstein said who believes in the God of Spinoza or whatever, like that more wide use of the word God. So not a
Yeah,
God that's personified as an
it's not
individual.
a it's not a fickle
So
individual personality. Yeah.
right. So God meaning the more comprehensive, why the source, or the original source that is still that's a manifestation, it appears out of. So it there could be direct experience of that, of those fundamental attributes and essences of God, and that can be realized directly. And then after that is realized, then there's the pursuit of the understanding of the manifestation of God, which is the world, the universe, the omniverse. And then it's not the in that larger vision, there, like, not all that is knowable is perceived through rational logical thought. It's very important that the thought should have the ability to be manipulated in that way, where there is rationality and there is logic and there is scientific investigation and all of that. It's not, I'm not saying that you should throw that away, and because the mind gets blown to the larger vision and all of that. But there is information and ways to understand the world that is beyond the scope of logic, and that in a sense is where the mind stops, and what would be called maybe the instinct, or the way phenomenon is perceived. There's a way of instinctually understanding that, and then perceive, and then transmitting and receiving information to say other bodies in the world or whatever. Like the way if you think say a human phenomenon is like one person thinks of another, and then the phone rings or whatever. Like the various ways in which there's communication that is beyond thought, and or what's called paranormal experience or whatever. Paranormal basically means that it hasn't been detected by science yet. So not woo, not speaking about woo and just all, again, human fiction about phenomenon that turns out to be a bunch of nonsense. But speaking of that, that the mind it can be expanded in that consciousness that happens when divine experience and breakthrough occurs like that, that the world starts to be perceived in different ways, and then you sort of go beyond the human description of what the world is, because you've broken out into the open of the whole cosmic experience of the world beyond beyond the human little construct, little tiny that is
Oh, yeah, the
civilization.
filter.
So then it transcends into all that. Instead of being alienated from the world, the goal of this whole process becomes being reintegrated into the world and perceiving it from an entirely different way. And then that would be spreading that information in order to wake more up into the evolution that is to occur. And so instead of criticizing the world, basically it's sort of it's the transcendental vision of the world in an entire vision, not in a human centric, human species focused, myopic dream superimposition that is and so that's attainable. So the first step is meditation. So one of the goals of the evolution of humans would be to spread the way the information about how to meditate. That would be the first step. So and those that would simply say, "Oh, meditation is not for me. I can't concentrate," need it the most. So so it's instead of just throwing that away and saying or whatever, or saying, "Oh no, that's part of religion," or whatever. Like for instance, the different religions do have the contemplation, or then there are many different ways to meditate, many different ways. The most the meditation that is most known is to have a mantra and have the body sit in one position and squirm around at first, and be highly uncomfortable and want to give up and all of that. But there are many different ways to meditate. One way that's also within other religions would be the rosary beads, or beads where you're concentrating on a mantra and then meditate and then repeating that mantra over and over. The goal of that is and mantra is to focus the mind on one in order to basically attain single focused concentration. Now, a lot of humans have problems with this because because and then there's ADHD. The ADHD, a lot of it is actually, some of it is neurological or chemical, biological. But a lot of ADHD that's perceived as or diagnosed as ADHD is also overloaded nervous systems of humans that are too stressed out bodies and have too much information to have to juggle and all. So their nervous systems are overloaded, and they start to, in a sense, malfunction. And so that's more like environmental ADHD, quote unquote. So, the goal would be to have, even if it's not delivered in a spiritual context and becomes a more secular phenomenon. If that's the way it has to spread in the world, then so be it. So to teach as many humans as possible how to begin the process of meditation, and then various steps and different methods of meditation. And this knows and teaches many that the goal is to slow the mind down, not so that the mind is not used and it's not the mind is going to become more clear, more focused, have more clarity, be able to see circumstances better without emotional responses and reactive responses, and cluttered, unclear thought, because that which leads to can lead to all sorts of improper decisions, and sort of how the thoughts that is occurring in the world currently, which I'll keep going back to, but we'll broach that. But the goal would be to because it's going to help improve, if not at least at the beginning, the mental health of many. And but that's the way in. The way in is meditation. And then as you go further and further into the investigation, it's like a scientific investigation, but instead of it being primarily what happens with science, is investigation of the external world. What we're going to deal with is the external world, that is the body, but we're going in to discover the consciousness that one is, the I that's always present, that's eternal, that's always present, it's always there, seemingly behind all the activity, and the body would not be able to live without that animating force, and the dimensionlessness of oneself as the true when they speak about, self-realization or self-actualization, or the genuine self and all of that, it's what's in back of all of that, that it in a certain way it becomes obvious what the true self is, to the point where there might be a click where it's like, but it seems like that it's always been, I've always been this all along and didn't realize it. And then the step beyond that, there are several steps, but that primary realization, it becomes like, oh, I always already was it. I've always been this, like the I am is, and that's where to make an analogy to or cross reference to God, I am that I am, is that that you basically, as that, there's no separation, there isn't like that this other entity, and that's the attribute of that other entity, that higher entity or whatever, and that that one has to pray to that. It's that there's no there isn't any separation from that, and that direct experience of the divinity of oneself is that. So it starts with meditation, but it's a whole investigation. It's a science. It's in a sense it's a scientific investigation of the inner, in order to blow out into the wide open of oneself as everything. And it's quite an investigation, and it's well worth it.
Well,
But
I think
then they're no longer the body. Like you're well beyond the body. Even the body is not the body. Like you could even say, in normal everyday consciousness, even if you don't even broach that and get to that level to basically blow open, you can say right now that the body is the universe. There's no separation between the body and the universe. So you could actually say that the body is the universe. So then you could say, I am the universe, right? So they wouldn't identify with being a separate entity. And even within that context, even if it didn't get into the gnosis in the true sense, on the body level, that one could say, no, I'm not the body, I'm actually the universe, and the universe is talking right now. And so I'll never die because I'm the universe. So even from that perspective, that could be a beginning right there. But
well, and
go ahead.
I think. Oh, well, I was going to say. I think partially. I'm partially there because I think I was introduced to the concept by my buddy Layman. I'm gonna shout him out again. He basically brought up the concept of perennialism. So kind of what is true about existence, what is true about God, what is true about gnosis or spirituality or existentialism or whatever. It will be criticized and it will be tested. And it will be brought through the lens of, like you're saying, even language is a narrative. We will understand these through a human frame, a human filter, a human narrative. But at the same time, what's real is real. What's true is true. So that kind of blows apart the narratives and the dogma of the traditions and stories that we've told ourselves. Whereas what's real, like you said, is the connection of ourselves to reality, of ourselves to the what I would call the Godhead or the source of creation. And then what I would say is I did have a series of disparate connections where I'd thought in the past, if we came from a singularity, how is that not the alpha? If we're
Mhm.
going towards a singularity, how is that not the omega? And if there was an alpha and an omega and the universe seems to be splitting apart or coming together simultaneously, where's the beginning and where is the end? And
Right,
so
right,
to have you kind of confidently assert, like, hey, dummy, there's no beginning, there's no end, except for this transformation, and then even using cosmological like so for instance, like people can be skeptical of things that we've discussed here tonight. What I'm telling you is a lot of the things that we're kind of talking about, while we might be extrapolating it through a spiritual lens, some of this stuff is just like physical fact, like the
hmm
study of the cosmological universe and the relate, like so for instance that like the relation between space and time. The reason why it's called the time space continuum is because you need space in order to have time. And if you remove space, you no longer have time. It blows the human mind because we're used to operating in this frame. But it's true. And then how does that play into our religious and spiritual conceptions? So what I would say is, I do, unfortunately, I'm slave to the temporal. So I do have to go to sleep. But number one, this is not going to be our last conversation. Number two, it was
right,
absolutely fascinating.
right.
Number three, it made coherent and clear a lot of concepts that were disparate revelations to me.
Mhm.
that were disconnected, but it kind of all ran them a through like a through line basically. And while I'm not ready to say like I am the universe or I am God, I'm not ready to say that yet. What I am willing to say is I'm going to try to root myself more in that connection because it's literally physically true. I
Right.
conceptualize myself as a different being because of my biology and my humanity and the narratives that I've been built. But the truth is, what separates me from the rest of the universe is a lot more thin than my narrative would allow me to believe. So I'll start playing with that mentally. And then also, one of the things that you were talking about was trying to be as connected to gnosis or as connected to the everlasting I am as you can be, and kind of trying to let go of that human filter and that human narrative so you can be better connected to the universe around you.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm going to try that because I have found when I've done that in the past, often during crisis, but when I've done that in the past, I have found deep connections. I have found paths and revelations and truths that were on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't want to admit them to myself. So yeah, I deeply appreciate this conversation. I want the recording. I'll absolutely be posting to my channel. Please tell my
Okay.
audience who you are and what you're trying to achieve, and where they can find you.
Okay. So to respond to that, yes, would like to explore this more. And there's so much information that we can continue to speak of in terms of the spirituality. Also, it's sometime soon that we go into the World War III aspect of what is actually occurring and how to contextualize that from the divine perspective and how that can be dealt with. This basically can speak about um, extensively about the what is going on in the world in relation to that. It says World War III just as a label for the occurrences that are taking place, but it's very the situation is very urgent, and would like to speak about that. I have great detail on the matter. Basically, been uh, been absorbing the information since say the very beginning of February in a very in an intense way, so can actually speak on the what appears to be the mundane level about the in great detail about it, and then also the overarching divine perspective on it as well. Meaning, this can speak in many different dimensionalities of about a particular phenomenon, but from many different dimensions of it. And also in regard to the spirituality, uh, since the primary hypnotizing uh, aspect of the human predicament is language, then there are methods to deconstruct language and to offer ways in which to speak from that evolved perspective in trying to evolve the world in the that sort of the quagmire that's occurring, can actually go into the linguistic ways in which this is playing out, and then offer prescriptive solutions to that. This is all about solutions. Not it's not speaking about problems. Many are speaking about problems, and that keeps the evolution from occurring in a more expedited fashion. This has to be about the solutions in order to get to in order to continue the evolution. Like, for instance, say, for example, what Elon Musk is doing in the world. And there's so many other apparent topics and subjects, like, for instance, interplanetary movements to off of this planet and to evolve to other planets and all. So I just wanted to mention just a few, just sort of like maybe a preview of what can be discussed further in the next sessions. So
Yeah,
again. Mhm.
I'm down because I think that some people are borderline allergic to contemplating these things. You know, like I think it's too much for them to give any kind of credence to, but at the same time, like it's so fundamentally important, like you said. Even you just saying like, hey, I don't just want to talk about problems, I want to talk about how do we move forward. That is an infinitely healthier perspective than I think what a lot of people have right now.
Mhm, mhm, right. So, I'd like to, for those that are watching, that are going to be watching this, and then this has entered this community, this space, in order to expand the scope of this activism that's occurring, and want to um, basically be welcomed into this community. And I'm going to be streaming and want to participate in this in order to evolve. If what is called politics or whatever, this does not perceive that sort of activism basically in the politics framework, but is able to act apparently in the world, but within that context, but not in a sense of that context, but very effectually. So this is the first step in that direction. And so this the name, again, this is SATYAVATARA. That's on the screen there. You can also refer to this as Satya. Satya means truth. So SATYAVATARA would mean truth avatar, and most are aware of what the word avatar means. So that's what that stands for.
It's
And
beautiful. I didn't put Avatara and Avatar together, and I didn't know what Satya
mhm,
meant. So the fact that you put it together for me is, and also in the higher context of this conversation, it's actually perfect. It's the perfect name. I like it.
thanks. And then the A is the two A's are squished together as one A, right in the middle. So the religion that this is the founder of for 10 years now in eternity, because it's eternity, but have to sometimes speak within that context. And so again, the religion is basically the evolution of religion, and it encompasses as well as the realization of the self, and would say God realization. But there are many different words that can be used in order to communicate in a wider way, with a wider scope. But it includes science, technology, AI, mathematics, linguistics, and so much more. And so that is, but again, this is expanding to all realms, and does not want to be, in a sense, perceived or minimalized as just being, again, because this is not what would be called cool, or when you start speaking of religion, there are many that will just close the door on listening any further. So this is would not want to be labeled or marginalized without being hurt. So it's going to be adaptive and by all means necessary in order to get the propagate the information that should transform the world and to evolve the world, not just for humans, but for beyond, for multi-species, for the planet, in order to reverse damage to the planet. It needs to be reversed, and then to go beyond to be able to travel to and colonize other planets. And so it's beyond, in a sense, it's even beyond the one particular planet. And this has a great vision of it. And at some point, it's also would like to be able to speak to those that have more power, that are in charge, quote unquote, in the human species construct, and even affect change that might have to do with speaking to world leaders if necessary. And so this has a great vision, like a grand vision of how to change the world and evolve the world. So
I,
if
I,
there's,
mhm.
go
Oh,
ahead.
I was going to say, I deeply, deeply appreciate it. I do want to do this again, and also, like you said, bring in the context of like current events, because I think that that would be an interesting discussion to see, like, hey, within the context of how we conceptualize the world, which I know is falling into human narrative, right? But this is the, this is how we think if we evolved human consciousness or evolved, our perception, how we could either avoid this altogether or how we can affect other people to improve it.
Mhm.
So I think that's a conversation we need to be having. My wife is sitting next to me, and I do have to go. But again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. Thank you for basically being completely unafraid to explore these concepts, because I do feel a lot of people clam up when they start broaching these concepts, and then also, even if it's from like a dialectic perspective, where I'm like, I'm pushing back, or have you thought about this, or how does this work, that kind of thing. I do think that forwarding positive visions of the world is exactly what we need at this point in time. So the fact that that is what you're visioning, it offers, or is attempting to implement in the world, I think that's deeply respectable, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. And I'm also aware of the way that you want to create community, and expand the ideas beyond what would be called the internet, which is another form of consciousness of the internet being conscious, but to expand it to what can be quantifiably seen as beneficial to the world on a seeming physical level. And so I commend you for wanting to create a community, and have actually been researching the ideas that you're putting forth for doing so.
Awesome, thank you. Then I am going to let you go. Please send me the recording. It was awesome, and I hope you have a
Likewise.
beautiful evening.